Okay, welcome back everyone. Next up, we are going to hear from Lou Cooperhouse, who's dialing in from San Diego. Now, Lou is CEO, president, and co-founder of BlueNalu. BlueNalu has the mission of becoming the global leader in producing great tasting cell-based seafood.
Hey, Laura, it's a pleasure to be part of this program today and part of such an outstanding program overall. So thank you very much for inviting me to participate. As Laura mentioned, our mission at BlueNalu is to be the global leader in manufacturing, marketing, and selling cell-cultured seafood. We see just enormous benefits providing consumers with great tasting products. And we're in fact driven by culinary, but also products that we identify as having a number of other benefits: healthy for people, humane for sea life, and sustainable for our planet. BlueNalu actually was founded in the state of Hawaii. For those who aren't familiar with the term Nalu, it's actually the Hawaiian word for wave. It's a new wave of thinking. It's really talking about really being conscious and conscientious of our environment and our planet. Hawaii is in fact the center of the Pacific Ocean, about 2,500 miles from any major landmass, and really is kind of an illustration of the problem that we are here to solve, providing consumers with products that we feel will be trusted, safe, and free of mercury and environmental contaminants. As you've heard from others presenting today, we're doing something similar. We all actually might approach the challenge of manufacturing cell-based protein products a little differently. In our case, we're isolating satellite cells, fibroblasts, and pre-adipocytes from fish tissue. This is an illustration of Mahi Mahi, producing stable cell lines without the use of genetic engineering, controlling proliferation and differentiation, and ultimately growing our cell cultures in bioreactors with our proprietary media, and producing edible fish tissue, just the fish tissue, the fillet, no heads, no tails, no bones, no skin, doing this without extrusion, and also doing this without antibiotics or genetic engineering or animal-derived components. So in the end of the day, it's about a product that just tastes the same as conventional seafood. So really understanding the taste, texture, the cooking characteristics, and having the same nutritional characteristics as well as conventional seafood products. You've seen this data in the earlier presentation. There's, I think, the one that Bruce provided from GFI that talked about the opportunities in culture meat and plant-based products as well. There's quite a bit of projections out there. This is one from A.T. Kearney that suggests that what we're calling alternative protein is not the case. It will in fact be the most found protein by the year 2040. So conventional products, if you will, products that are manufactured from living animals, today, being roughly, well, today is 2021. So before this kind of graph starts, we're seeing somewhere between 90 and 100% of all of our meat supply comes from conventional sources. And as meat consumption continues to increase, what this projection shows is that culture meat will grow at 41% annual growth rate, representing 35% global market share in just 2 decades, where plant-based will grow at 9% annual growth rate, representing 25% market share, as conventional meat, in fact, does become unconventional. So we are, in fact, I think the illustration of the Silicon Valley in the 70s, we are 50 years later. This is the front end of a transformation of our global protein supply that we are at right now, where we will see conventional meats become unconventional by the year 2040. So I believe this is a reasonable data point. When we think about seafood, today it's roughly a 200 and change billion dollar market. According to certain data, this industry is obviously quite significant. We get quite excited by seafood, and why BlueNalu began in seafood was really because it does offer some really unique challenges. Terrestrial animals clearly have tremendous benefits for climate change and many other challenges that can be solved. But when we think about seafood, it just candidly has been a bit of a forgotten animal We don't have the same personal maybe association with seafood as we've historically had with meat, but at BlueNalu, we clearly do. We recognize that the demand for seafood is in fact at an all-time high and is anticipated, based on UN FAO data to really increase dramatically in the future as GDP around the world increases. So Asia particularly is a very high per capita consumer of seafood. In fact, 3 to 5 times of the consumption of seafood versus United States or Europe in certain countries. So as GDP increases, we are going to see more stress on our oceans. So this chart on the bottom is from the FAO and reported by Rabobank, showing that conventional wild captured seafood has been flat for about 3 decades. So from the 1990s till now, we are not capturing any more seafood from the ocean. Aquaculture has made up the balance. And candidly, there are issues with both wild caught and farm raised seafood that I'll talk about in a minute. So we just cannot feed the planet in the future. So seafood really is a unique issue with land animals. Frankly, they are very predictable. They are in many cases tagged. And if I was in the supply chain at a meat company, it's very easy to predict demand and supply. That is not the case in seafood. There's a reason at a restaurant that might say market price on a menu, whereas ribeye steak might have a consistent price, because that's really, if you will, a bit of reality that is really unknown. It's a highly variable supply chain. It's called fishing, not catching, for a reason. So if you think about the supply of seafood, it's increasingly diminishing. It's insecure, it's highly variable, very vulnerable to climatic events, acidification, warming oceans, algae blooms, environmental disasters, nuclear disasters, all can have a dramatic effect on our supply chain. So here we are in a current and a post-COVID world, dealing with vulnerability of our planet. So if anything, in my opinion, that is the most vulnerable supply chain, it really is seafood. On top of that, we have issues around animal suffering and bycatch, issues with damage to our ocean floors, coral reefs via trawling, nets, the just inefficiency of fishing. Obviously, animal welfare concerns are very significant, as many fish, when they die, it is a very horrible and slow death, typically by suffocation. There's also illegal labor practices associated with this industry. And there's also a fair amount of misrepresented products, either intentional or unintentional fraud that occurs in this industry. And of course, there's issues with microplastics, mercury, and environmental pollutants. So this is kind of a various buckets of those challenges that the seafood supply chain has. And in fact, in the United States, the US EPA and FDA, as you can see on the bottom right of the screen, have advice about eating fish for pregnant and nursing women, to either avoid certain species of fish, have 1 serving per week or 2 to 3. But what if there was a mercury-free product like Bluefin Tuna, where you could have as much as you want? You could really have now a 4th bucket, if you will, and no longer have a restriction on the seafood that you might consume, and feel confident in that and trusted in that supply chain. So again, ocean health, community health, ecosystem health, animal suffering, and personal welfare are just an array of reasons why cell-based seafood has extraordinary benefits for our population. So literally, it's very true. There are so many fish in the sea. So when we started BlueNalu, we said, what should our strategy be? So as a person who comes from the food industry with a little over 35 years experience in all sorts of companies and environments, and very culinary driven on a personal level, we also recognize that we need to understand the market opportunities for cell-based seafood. And we identified that if you look at all the different types of fish that are consumed, there are, traditionally there's finfish products, there's crustaceans, and there's mollusks. So we identified that finfish products was a really natural place for us to begin the business. They are very historically overfished. They're primarily imported. So we also recognize the politics of the food industry. And we identified that with BlueNalu, our strategy could be very successful if we really were very conscious And the word nalu actually, in addition to meaning wave in Hawaiian, also is slang for being thoughtful and conscious. So our whole approach has been to really work in collaboration with the seafood industry and to displace imports. So we are literally helping to create jobs and build factories while providing products that are healthy for people, humane for sea life, and sustainable for our planet. So another beauty of seafood is it does in fact command a premium value. So the products that we're actually targeting are the fillet category of finfish. And again, looking at displacing imports, focusing on species that are scarce or on watch lists, and offer significant food safety, environmental concerns. And of course, species where we feel we can create early adoption amongst consumers. So if you translate that into actual product applications, we're actually beginning with Mahi Mahi. Mahi Mahi is actually a fish known to Hawaii, but also very known to California. So our whole approach is to customize the species for each country in which we go to market. Seafood is a highly fragmented industry around the world. Unlike terrestrial animals, which have some very major players, many of us might be able to rattle off some names of some canned tuna companies. So that's one process, canning, and one species, tuna. But you may not be able to mention any of the fresh or frozen tuna companies, nor any other companies doing other species. So if you think about that fragmentation that exists globally, we are really have developed a partner strategy, which I'll talk about shortly. But Mahi Mahi is an example of a species that cannot be farm raised. In fact, they actually don't like each other. And if you have 10 fish together, you might have one left in about 30 minutes. But Bluefin Tuna is another great example where we could create, if you will, an oxymoron of a mercury-free, sustainable, available year-round bluefin tuna, democratized for the planet, no longer restricted on its supply. You can see other fish that we're considering as well in the future. And our approach at BlueNalu is really to think from the beginning of the company about scale production. What does it look like? Beginning with the fundamentals of cell growth and creating stable cell lines, and then migrating to larger and larger bioreactors as we scale up to 10 liter, to say 300 liter, to 2,000, to 20,000 and beyond, ultimately demonstrating in what we call phase 5, a large scale factory that can demonstrate economic profitability. Back in late 2019, we actually were very excited to demonstrate whole muscle seafood product. This was Yellowtail Amberjack. And our objective, back to being a culinary driven company, was to show that we could manufacture cell-based seafood products with the same functional characteristics. They could be heated, whether in oil or steamed or microwaved. They could caramelize if they're seared, or they could be prepared with an acidified solution like in poke or ceviche or kimchi, or prepared raw. So this was kind of an early demonstration of our proof of concept. And what we're doing right now is launching what we call phase 3 of our operation, building out a GMP food production plant where we can continually roll out new species and new product applications, beginning with Mahi Mahi, followed by Bluefin Tuna, red snapper, and others to follow, in different product forms, cubes, fillets, strips, and so forth. Again, each of these is an engineering milestone. This whole industry is at the front end of its commercialization. We will learn an awful lot in this new facility. By no means is anybody's industry really ready for massive market rollout, but this new facility will really allow us to commercialize and validate many different product applications and species. So we're very excited by that. We've also modeled what large scale production looks like. We think this facility can be introduced sometime 2024, 2025, where this product could actually launch products. We're envisioning this to occur in Southern California. Working with strategic partners, we feel that the opportunity is global. If you will, this could become a bit of a cookie cutter factory that can be rolled out across the globe. This is a demonstration of, say, 3 different products being produced in parallel, or a facility producing 3 production lines of the same species, enabling a variety of flexibility. Our whole approach at BlueNalu is all about working with partners. And for those that are participating today, we certainly welcome having those conversations about collaboration. It begins understanding the consumer. R&D supply chain partners, operations engineering, food science and culinary, and food service retail channel partners are really what's really critical for all of us to be successful in this industry. And we really welcome those collaborations. We're very excited that we've been able to, we recently announced a $60 million financing, roughly $85 million or $84.5 million invested to date, but very motivated by the fact that amongst our investors included now 6 strategic investors on the supply chain side, like Nutreco and Griffith Foods, but also organizations that could support us in operations, sales, market distribution, such as Pulmuone, Sumitomo, Rich Products, and Thai Union. Our approach, as is the case of all of us in the cell-based and plant-based and fermentation categories, is to really be aligned with UN SDGs. We're very focused on number 14, life below water, but we also see that the result of our efforts can result in many other benefits. As you can see here, supporting hunger, climate action, decent work, economic growth, industry innovation, good health, and of course, number 17, working in partnership to really support our goals. So again, this is my contact information, our website, and happy to answer any questions anybody may have. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks very much, Lou. That was an excellent presentation. So we do have a few questions. There have been a couple asking about the nutritional equivalence of your cell-based seafood products compared to conventional seafood. In particular, will your fish contain omega-3 oils and fatty acids?
It definitely will, Laura, and it's a great question. And in fact, as we're talking with the FDA, and I imagine that will be true of other regulatory agencies, it is important to demonstrate nutritional equivalence to conventional products. And that's really going to be necessary for the appropriate nomenclature and to have our product labeled as what they are, bluefin tuna, red snapper, etc. But yes, they will have the same omegas and other nutritional characteristics as conventional seafood. Great,
thanks. And I'll just do one or two more just because I'm conscious of the time. So this one's from Sam. He said, do you imagine producing your seafood out of 2 or 3 large factories or lots of small factories, I guess, for global production?
You definitely see the latter. So this is really designed to replace today's really challenging environmental footprint. So today, for example, we're shipping seafood from, say, Southeast Asia to New York City. That's about 10,000 miles. That's about 30 or 50% bycatch. That's about 60% yield. So our model is to replace that supply restricted model with a demand driven model, where we would have factories that might be, say, 100 or 500 miles from consumers, and not really rely on that massive, environmental footprint that exists today. So we do see a number of factories around the globe. It is a massive industry, and it will require that kind of infrastructure to support global demand.
Yeah, definitely. And just one last question. Do you foresee going down the same path as Beyond Meat and having a potential IPO in the future, or not?
We're certainly undecided about that, Laura, and but certainly we're very motivated by finding the best strategy that will allow us to achieve significant and rapid growth. So we're entertaining various options at this point.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Lou.